Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Chav Ches and Nizir. We learn for Aliyas Neshama of Rav Chanoch ben Sefer Cohen and for Rachel Bat Moshe. The Neshamas have an Aliyah. So today's daf is daf Chav Ches. We already got yesterday down to the Mishnah, but we'll begin right now. The Mishnah on Chav Ches Nizrak Achad Men Adam Ein Yachal Haifer. We know that a husband can break his wife's naziris because a naziris is a kind of a neder or a shvua. It's really like a combination of both. She forbids herself from the three prohibitions by becoming a nazira, and he can break the neder. A husband can break the neder. Why? Because a husband can break a neder that involves eating nefesh, either suffering or something that affects their marriage, beino beino, something that affects their relationship. So, what happens? When is the Naziris over? A Stam Naziris, you said, it's 30 days. Unless you say, I want it in 100 days or 64 days, or whatever you make up. A regular Naziris. We're not talking about a Naziris Shimshon or a Naziris Olam or a Naziris Le'olam. Regular Naziris is over as many days. Let's talk minimum 30 days. That's standard Naziris. So after 30 days, what happens? When is it over? We know after 30 days, she has to shave, she or he, whoever the Naziris, has to shave their entire head. Like they shave their head, and they bring three karbanos, chatasol and shlamim. When is the Naziris over? When can she begin drinking wine again, going to a funeral again? When can she begin that? So we're going to have a machlokas. We're going to talk about that later on. Some say that until she shaves, she has to actually shave. Until she shaves or he shaves, can't drink wine. Our Mishnah doesn't hold that way. Our Mishnah says that if you burn any one of the karbanos, chatasol shlamim, whichever one you began first, as soon as you resurrect the dam, in other words, you did shchit balach zrika, the four processes, and you resurrect the dam, at that point she could drink wine already. Therefore, the Mishnah says, beginning Mishnah says, nisr lechem and adamin, if you already bought one of the karbanos and they sprinkled the dam on the mizbeach, and yochalefer, for the husband can't break the neder anymore. Why? Now, what do you mean you can't break the neder? What is there to break? What's there to break? The remaining karbanos, let's say the remaining karbanos. So he says, you know what? Or as we'll see, even that very carbon, because if he breaks the carbon, let's say he breaks the neder at that point. Let's say she brought the first carbon they brought was the chatos, and now he broke the carbon. So why would the Kohanim eat the carbon anymore? Now it's like chatas shenis, it's a chatas shenis kapar ba'aleh. In other words, it's a carbon chatas that already has atonement. You don't need atonement anymore. There's no more neder. So then we're going to see it's going to be destroyed. So the point is that there's still a reason why he might break the neder. But he says, nizir the dam, says the Tanakama, once you sprinkle the dam, and according to the Tanakama, she could drink wine already at that point. As I said before, it's machlok. When can she start drinking wine? When are the prohibitions removed? After she shaves or after you bring any of the karbanos? Our Tana holds that as soon as you brought one of the karbanos and you resurrect the dam for that, she's could drink wine already. So at that point, he has no excuse to break the neder. Remember, a husband can only break a neder if it involves eating nefesh, suffering, or it's something beino beino. Well, there's no more suffering anymore. Not suffering. In those days, it was considered suffering not to be able to drink wine. There wasn't much else to drink. Water was dirty, right? It was hard to find. They didn't have all the drinks we have today. So nizigul echad men adamim. Once you resort the dam, and he can't break that anymore because there's no money left. She can drink wine now. Even if there was no zrika dam, even if you just shechted the carbon, the first process is shchita, then kabbalah, halacha, zrika. You just shechted it. Also, he can't break it anymore for a different reason. Now, wait a minute. She still can't drink wine at this point, right? So why can't he break? There's still something to break here. She can't drink wine. Tanakama says, as soon as she can drink wine, there's nothing to break anymore. There's no reason to break the neder. Okay, that I understand. But everybody agrees that just shchita does not free her to drink wine. So therefore, she's still prohibited from drinking wine. So where Bekiva says, no, even if he just did shchita, he can't break it anymore. And we'll see why. The reason is because if he shechted it and then he broke the neder, then what are you going to do with the carbon? You're going to have to throw it out. And it's bizayin for a kachim. So Bekiva's reasoning is, even not because she's mutter to drink wine now, there's no reason to break it, like Tanakam. But Kiva says, no, if you did shchita, you also can't break it anymore because the meat will go for naught. The meat will have to be destroyed if it's a carbon, if it's a chatas, as we'll see. So if you can't break it anymore, and therefore he can't break it. He's not allowed to break it at that point. He's not allowed to. In other words, we don't allow the Chum don't allow him to break the net at that point. And if there was Rikas Dam already, and you hold like our Mishnah that once there's Rikas Dam, she's allowed to drink wine, then there's no reason to break the net anymore. That's all if we're talking about the kabbanis that she brings at the end of her 30-day standard period. Meaning shaving after the 30 Tara, if she completed 30 days Bitara in purity, so she brings the kabbanis. Let's say she's bringing the kabbanis for having become tameh in middle. She was exposed to a mess during her period, during her Naziris. Therefore, she had to keep 7 days to purify herself and then bring karbanos. And those, we said, the two birds and the keves for the asham, or the ayil for the asham. That's what we're speaking about here. Yefer, you could still break it because you could say, so I don't want a repulsive woman, meaning by tiglachas atuma, there we're talking about tiglachas atara, that we say, he can't break it because to drink wine. But if it's not tiglachas atuma, what happens after tiglachas atuma? After the 7 days and she shaves, brings the karbanos, she's got to start the 30 days over again, right? Because once you were tummy in middle, knocks off the first day, she has to start all over again. So you can say, so at this point, you can say, yeah, I can break her netter because I don't want her to have to, I don't want a suffering woman. A woman who's suffering from not drinking wine will be repulsive. She's not going to be in a good mood, right? Rashi brings down the pasuk in Zechariah that when she's also to drink wine, is considered repulsive. Wine will make the young women joyous, and if they're not joyous, they're repulsive. If they're not in a good mood, if they're suffering from not drinking wine, they're not going to be in a good mood. So you could say then he could break the netter, because this is what we're talking about. After you bring one of the dam, can't break it anymore. That's one of the weakest of the dam of the 3 kabbanas that she brings after 30 days. The regular, when she finishes her regular period of Naziris. But if we're talking about the kabbanas that she brings at the end of Tumah, after the 7 days of Tumah, middle of Naziris, where she has to start counting all over again, then he can still break it, because saying, I don't want to have to live with a woman who's suffering from not drinking wine. Rebbe Omer, some have the gifts of Rav Meir, but most of the Rishonim have the gifts that it's Rebbe. Rebbe Omer, after he can even break it there. I'll tell you what does she have to do now at the end of the 30 days, regular 30 days? Brings it to Karbanis and shaves. Shave her whole head off. Now, unless you're very Hasidish that they like the women shave the head, and that's considered normal in their circles, most men would find it repulsive to have a woman who's shaven, whose head is all shaven off. So Rebbe says, even the Tara, and what? And she brought one of the karbanas. What did the Tanakhama say? She brought one of the karbanas, you can drink wine already. So there's nothing to break. No, there's nothing to break in terms of Inu Nefesh. She's not suffering anymore. But he's going to suffer. It's going to affect their relationship of Bein al-Beinah if his wife is going to shave her whole head off. So he's okay. She didn't want to drink wine for 30 days. I can manage with that. But I don't want to have to shave her head off and shave her whole head. Therefore, Rebbe says he could even break the net at that point in time. Masis like Rebbe Lezer, but our mission does not go like Rebbe Lezer. 2 lines from the bottom page of the Gemara on Chav Chesim and Aleph. Masis like Rebbe Lezer, Rebbe Lezer, Amatik Lechas Makeves. He holds no. He holds that shaving, that bringing a carbon alone does not free her to drink wine, does not remove the prohibition of wine, but rather shaving does. She has to shave first. Therefore, Rebbe Lezer says, he says that if she hasn't shaved yet, she can't drink wine. Since she hasn't shaved her head yet, she can't drink wine. Since she is going to consider being suffering and being repulsive because she can't drink wine, we could break the netter even after you reserve one of the dams. Remember, Rabbi Kiva said even after you shechted one of the karbanas, can't break it anymore because of the bizi kachim. But everybody agrees in our Mishnah, or at least the first part of the Mishnah, not. We're talking about that besides Rebbe said even the Glachzatari could break it. Why? Because of Bein al-Beino. He doesn't want her to shave her head off, shave all her hair off. That's a different reason. But the Tanakhama says once you Zorik Dam, she's free to drink wine, so there's nothing to break anymore. Yes, but Rabbi Lezer holds no. Rabbi Lezer holds that just being Zorik one of them, bringing one of the karbanos is not free to drink wine. Shaving Shaving is what enables her to drink wine. In other words, if you haven't shaved yet, even if you brought the karbanos, she can't drink wine. So we'll talk. That's what we're going to talk about. Can you the shaving from first or the karbanos? The truth is we'll probably come out. I mean, there's a shaila about the machlokas, but we'll see. It doesn't really make a difference. She could shave first. She could shave first, or she could bring the karbanos first. But if she didn't, the question is, what allows her to drink the wine? The shaving or the karbanos? Rabbi Lezer holds that the shaving allows her. So even if you brought the karbanos, she still can't drink wine. So as long as she can't drink wine, you can say, I don't want her suffering anymore. She's suffering, and therefore she's repulsive. She's not in a good mood, and therefore he can break it. We're going to talk about that later on. What's the proper order? Even this lay nivel matzi make. Okay, so our Mishnah is going to go to Tana di dan savar. Our Tana holds keeping this record let dam once you're rezarik the dam la'al to shari b'cham. As soon as you rezarik the dam, even if she hasn't shaven yet. Then let's say the normal way is you bring the kabbanas, then you shave. But as soon as you brought one of the kabbanas, she's meant to drink wine right away. In other words, like the Nazir is over. So there's no repulsiveness. She's not suffering. She's not going to be in a bad state of mind. So therefore, you can't break the netter anymore. Rabbi Kiva Savar, afilu ishtachitas, even if you just shechted the behema, and you can't break it anymore. Mishum hefset kachim. Rashi says the lashon of mishum bezayin kachim. It's the same thing, idea meaning because if you shechted the carbon and now she's no longer a nazira, so you wouldn't kachim because you're not going to be zarek the dam. You're going to be zarek the dam now, and you're not going to eat it. So you're going to wind up throwing out the carbon. The whole vein about miskapman in a basar is not going to eat it. So you're going to wind up burning the let's say the basar chatos for nothing. You're going to destroy the carbon. So therefore, you should, because of hefsed kachim, not because it's a problem of beino lebeina, but rather, in other words, even if you haven't been zarek the dam yet, so she's not mutter to drink the wine yet, you still can't break the nether because of the zayin kachim. Maskov of Zera. Rav Zera asked, "V'amai lizruk dam shalashman." What do you mean? Let's say you shechted it already. What are you concerned about? If he breaks the nether now, if he breaks the naziris now, the meat will have to be thrown out. V'amai lizruk dam shalashman. You could be zarek it down with a kavan of shelo lishma. V'yater basa b'chil. Then the meat is allowed to be eaten. Milo Tanya, didn't we learn kivsei atzeres? Kivsei atzeres are the kavanos, the carbon siva that they bring on shvuas. Shishachtan shalashma v'yesh shalashma. O shachma v'nei zmanan, brought it too early. O la'achar zman, or after there's man. Hadam yizarik, you zarik the dam. Va'abasar yechol, the basar can be eaten. Ma'isa Shabbos lo yizarik. If it was on Shabbos, if shvuas came out on Shabbos, you shouldn't be zarik the dam. Why? Because you can't eat the basar anyway. Because you can't roast the basar on Shabbos, right? You can't sound to be eaten because since it's not a regular cook. Since it's not the quantum cannot eat it because you can't eat it raw. They're not going to eat it raw, and they can only eat it after Shabbos, so they shouldn't be zarek the dam on Shabbos. So it says, "Oh, lachman, yes, Shabbos, you shouldn't be zarek the dam because you're not going to be able to eat it anyway on Shabbos." But if you did it, hortza, it is okay. You can bring the imurim at night. In other words, it's good enough for that. If Rashi says nechel b'Shabbos, sheins lias kachim doches a Shabbos. Even kachim that could be eaten by Kohen, but it's not. But cooking them and roasting them is not mutter on Shabbos. And therefore, loisim are courts alakrim or lev. But what do you see? You see that. What do you mean? Just because a carbon is no good, you did it shalom lishma, it's not yotzei. So it's but still you could eat. It's still possible to eat it if you're zarek the dam shalom lishma. Amri either shachat ol shlam machanami. Right. If you shechted the ol shlam again, because the order is not not that important. It's not important which one you brought first. If you shech the ol shlam, you're right. The ol shlam, there is a way out of it. If you shechted the chatas first, and the rule of a chatas and a skapar baleh has to be destroyed. And that's what happened over here. And ol shlam, you could always say, bring it anyway as an adaba. But a chatas you can't bring as an adaba. So if there's no longer naziris, because he breaks his naziris after they shechted the karban chatas, nothing to do with it, will be destroyed. And therefore it's a bezayin kachim. So Rabbi does not allow him to break it then. Says that the Mishnah said that, as we're going to see this later on, that if you shechted if you shave after you brought any of the karbanos, it's also yotzei. In other words, if you did the process on one of them, Rashi says here, let's get it done in Gilach. You can check them. Get it done in Gilach. In other words, smashma from the Lashon Rashi is the Manatemra. Anyway, whichever one you wanted to shech first, you could shech first. If you shech the whole shlom, you're right. You're not going to come out with the bezayin kachim. But if you shech the chatas first, and bezayin kachim, so therefore, Rabbi Akiva makes a general rule and says that if you did shechita at all, even if you didn't do the zrika yet, if you did shechita at all, the Tanna Kama says if you did zrika already, there's no reason to break the neder because there's no more eating nefesh. You can drink wine now. Rabbi Akiva might agree with that too. But Rabbi Akiva says even if you did shechita, you can't break it anymore because you'll have a bezayin of kachim. When is that all said? Said the Mishnah. If you're talking about shechting after doing the korbanos and the shaving after 30 days, because then at that point, if you already zarek one of the dams of one of the korbanos, whichever one you brought first, she's free to drink wine. But tiglachas tuma, if we're talking about you did this rika on one of the korbanos of tuma, where she still has to fulfill her 30 days afterwards, and he could break it. I don't want a woman who's repulsive, who's not going to drink wine for 30 days. But Rebbe Omer, he says, he argues in the Gemara here is Rav Meir, but not Mishra is Rav Meir Omer. Rebbe Omer, I feel the glachas tara yefer. Why Mashiach Omer? I don't want a woman, even though she could drink wine now after 30 days. We're not going like Rav Elazar. We're going to Tana Bar Mishnah that as soon as you brought one of the karbanos and you zarek the dam, she's free to drink wine. Yes, she's free to drink wine, but I don't want her to shave now. The 30 days is up, right? She brought the three karbanos. Even if you brought all three, can he still break it? Rebbe says, yeah, he could still break it because what does she still have left to do? Shave her head. I don't want her to shave her head. I don't want a woman who's shaving.
But that starts from the beginning. I mean, it's like from the beginning of the Nizir, you could say.
He knows that, right? That's why he could break. He could have broken it at any time. He could have broken the netter at any time. He could have broken the Naziris from day one, as soon as he heard about it. Or, well, the truth is he can only break it, maybe just heard about it now. He could have broken it before. Could have broken it for one of two reasons. Either because he doesn't want a woman who's going to shave her head, or because he doesn't want a woman who's going to be in a bad mood and suffering because she can't drink anything, right? But he can only break it, as we know, when he heard about the day that he heard about it. Let's say he heard about it right then. Came home from a trip and she hasn't gone to the hairdresser in 30 days and she's not in a good mood and he sees she's bringing korban. He says, wait a minute, you're about to shave your head off. It's enough that I'm bald. I don't want you to be bald. You know what I mean? I don't want a bald wife. So Rabbi says therefore he could still break it. You have Shibishim of us. What about the Tanna Kama? The Tanna Kama doesn't say. The Tanna Kama says that if you brought one of the korbanos already, finishes Rika, can't break anymore because she's not going to be, she could drink wine now, so she's not going to be in a bad mood, right? She's not going to be, unseemly. She won't be in a bad way because she could drink wine. Yeah, but what about the fact that maybe he can break her netter because she's going to be bald? Why doesn't the Tanna Kama say that? Tanna Kama says once she's brought one of the korbanos, even if she hasn't shaven yet, he can't break the netter anymore because she could drink wine now. What about the fact that she's going to be bald, like Rebbe says? Tanna Kama says, well, she can put on a wig. She could put on a wig, so it's not going to be repulsive to put on a wig. The Rebbe Savar, the wigs weren't with the kind of wigs we have today, probably, and they get dirty, and he didn't want a wig. He didn't want a woman with a wig. He wanted a woman who had her hair on. Okay. Yeah, sure. It says the Mishnah. We had this before. We learned this halacha before. A man can make his young son under bar mitzvah, can turn him into a nazir. He can say, you're a nazir now. And now we said, even though he said that, but not a woman. A woman, the mother cannot, the man can. Why? We'll see in the Gemara. Ketza. What do you mean? What do you mean? How do you get out of it? Let's say he shaved. Kid, he told your 8-year-old son you're a nazir. Nazir said, I don't care about that. I'm going to the barber. He gets a haircut. Or other relatives gave him a haircut. He protested. He said, I don't want this. Or his other relatives protest on his behalf. So then he's no longer a nazir. Yeah, but let's say the father had already set aside karbanos to fulfill the nazir's period. Haisla behema fresh. This is the same thing. These are the same halachas as we had by a woman, who was a Nazira and set aside her karbanos, and the husband broke her neder. What do you do with the karbanos? The same thing. Haisla behema fresh. Let's say she had behemoths that were set aside, or in this case, he had behemoths for the son, this young son, behemoths. If it's a chatas, Thomas, chatas skaper balet, so chatas shemesa baleh is lamisa. That's the Gemara compared to before. It's like there's no owner anymore. The ola, think about the ola you bring as an ola, you can bring that as an adava. Ushlamim, the ashlam yikvu shlamim. Then it has a halacha of a shlam of a nazir, not a regular shlam that's eaten for 2 days and a night, but the shlam of a nazir, as we say in Karbanos, a toad of el nazir is only eaten for 1 day and a night. Shlam ben echol yom echad means 1 day, 1 night, right? They ain't tuna lechem, no bread with it, because there's you don't bring lechem with it because there's no the whole person lechem. You put the lechem on the hands of the nazir. There's no nazir now. Haylamo stumen. That's the halacha we talked about the last couple of days. Let's say he set aside money, but he didn't specify which money was for which karbanos. Just said this is some money for the karbanos. He's put that aside. Yiflon adava. That's what he says. Halacha Moshe Messina. Rabbi Yochanan said. It goes for an adava. You give it to the base mish. They bring karbanos. They bring olos with it. Most mefurasha. Let's say the money was set aside. This money is for the chatas. This is for the olos, for the shlamim. The mechatos yachol yamamelech. You got to destroy it. The lo nehen of lo molim. Whenever you have a chatas that's going to be destroyed, either the money of the chatas or the chatas itself, there's no meila because Rashi points out because since it's not capable of bringing brought as a carbon, there's no meila anymore, and therefore. There's no milah min araisa min rabbanan. You can't have enough from it. Okay. To me ola yaviu ola, the value of the ola, in other words, the money that was set aside for the ola, you bring that as an ola. Yeah, you use that. Bring a carbon ola within a mom ban. Once you set aside as an ola is kachim kachim, so you're mowing it immediately, right? Even before. Again, we talked about moil means if you had enough from it, you turned it into something, right? You really can't take a vein of kachim and turn it into chulin, as we saw yesterday. But there's meal if you had enough from it, you could work with it, etc. Moment. To make shlamim, you have you shlamim. The value of shlamim you bring as a shlamim, as we said before. So if you set aside animals, that's the rule. And if you set aside money, though it's basically the same idea. If you set aside an animal like a chatas, you destroy the chatas. You starve it and you let it die. If it was the value money of the chatas, that is also destroyed. You put in the yamamelch. If it was ola or the value of an ola, you bring it as an oath. If it was a shlum or the value of a shlum, you bring that as a shlumim. But the rules of Nazir supply that it's only eaten for 1 day and a night. There's no lechem because there's no Nazir. So first, let's deal with the basic idea here that a man can make his young son a Nazir, but not the mother. Now, what is that? Where do we get that from? What's the point of that? A kid who's not bar mitzvah has no mitzvahs, right? He's not bar mitzvah. He's not mechuyev mitzvah. How can he make him into a Nazir? And you're going to bring karbanos also. The Gemara is now going to deal with all that. Ish ein aval ish lo. It says a man, ish mandras beno, vein ish mandras. Why my time? Why can only a father make his young son a Nazir, and not a mother? What about a daughter? Right? We said the father can make his son a Nazir. We didn't say anything about a daughter. We deal with all that now. Ish ein aval ish lo. Not a woman. A woman cannot. She can't make her son a Nazir. My time. What's the reason? It's a just as we had a Lachi ben Nazir that if you had most stumin, it all goes to an adava. Otherwise, I would say, listen, some of the money is ola, some is shlam, some is chatas. Bring it as they are. If it's chatas and skaper balev, shemesa balev, fine, they destroy it. Otherwise, bring it as a carbon. But if it's stam money, that was the Gemara asked the other day. Even if you had the $1,000 that you set aside for 3 karbanos, part of that money is for a chatas. And if chatas shemesu ba'aleh, there's no owner anymore, it's got to be destroyed. So how could you bring it as an adava? That's an alachal mashmi sinai. Here's an alachal mashmi sinai by Nazir that a father can make his son a Nazir. Of course, the son could get out of it by objecting, or somebody could object on his behalf. But if he didn't object, he's a Nazir. She says in the name of Rosh Lakesh. Some say that it doesn't have Rav Shapiro in the name of Rosh Lakesh, and Rashi also points out that it's all Rosh Lakesh really. It's not necessarily Rosh Lakesh. Name Rosh Lakesh, but anyway, Rosh Lakesh. He says, no, it's mitzvahs chinuch to teach him. You want to teach him what a Nazir is. That's why it's not the halacha mashmi sinai. That it's part of chinuch. That if he wants to, he could be a Nazir. To teach him how to be a Nazir. Okay, but What about the karbanos? If it's only chinuch to teach him, how are you going to bring karbanos into the base of Mikdash just on teaching? What does that mean? Gemara says, so if that's the case, right? If that's the case, why not a woman also, right? Why not a Muslim? In other words, if it's Allah Mashmi Sinai, he says that the father can make his son a Nazir, not the mother and not the daughter, right? This is father special Allah Sinai. Shloki says chinuch. Okay, so why can't the woman also? If there's no father in the family, doesn't the mother have an obligation to see that her kid gets a good Jewish education? Right? So he says she would do it anyway. A good Jewish woman would do that anyway because she wants her son to grow up properly. But she's not chayiv to teach her. So that's what Rish Lakish holds, that a woman is not chayiv to teach her son. That's Rish Lakish's opinion, not necessarily the halacha. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, says, I understand why it only applies the father can make his son a Nazir, not a daughter, because that was the halacha Mishmi Sinai. Now, there's no svara to it. That's the halacha Mishmi Sinai. That's what God said. El Rish Lakish, according to Rish Lakish, Afilu Bito. Why? According to Rish Lakish, based on chinuch, don't you have an obligation to teach your daughter too? He yells that a daughter, you're not mechuyev to teach her mitzvahs. How is she going to learn that? I guess Das Yehudis, she'll grow up in a Jewish family and she'll know, but there's no chiv to teach her mitzvahs. Again, that a father can make his son into a nazir, but not a mother and not a daughter. So Hachim and Nazir saying, that's why there's a special halacha about Naziris. That's the halacha about Naziris. What about Nadar? Why not train your son by telling him that oranges are forbidden to make a netter for the kid too? Why don't you do that too? Because that's halacha Mishmi Sinai. If it's to teach him mitzvahs, why do I have to teach him Naziris? Teach him netter also. Teach him other mitzvahs too. It says Lomi boy coming. You're right. And Chami, it includes that too. Lomi boy, there's no question. There's no question, ben Adarim, the Leslie Nivel. Certainly you should teach him out Adarim. Because if you're just forbidding him, let's say, from eating apples or from playing ball or from doing certain things, this thing is also to him, there's no repulsiveness involved, there's no suffering involved. Ella, Filu, ben Aziris, even Aziris, this like Nivel, you might say, when you're causing your son to suffer by not having any wine to drink, you might say that wouldn't be part of chinuch mitzvah. Chinuch, you have to teach him there too. So again, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's all good. That's the halacha Mishmi by Nazir, father and son, nothing else. According to Shlokish, it's chinuch. Why dafir chinuch and Naziris? Why not Nadarm also? The answer is yeah, sure. Nadarm also you should teach him. A father should teach his son what a netter is and what Naziris is, etc. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, Allah ibn Nazir. According to Rabbi Yochanan, says halacha Mishmi Sinai. I'm Niktani Micha Osha Micho Krava. Makes sense. Okay, if it's halacha Mishmi Sinai. So that's how part of the Halacha Mishmi Sinai is that you're supposed to teach him to be a Nazir, and if he objects or his family objects, okay, then he's no longer a Nazir. El Rish Lakish takes out the rest of the El Rish Lakish, Kovin and Karovim the Amrle Lo Tigmer mitzvahs. If according to Rish Lakish the reason is because he's supposed to teach him mitzvahs, are his relatives allowed to say no? We don't want him to learn a mitzvah. According to Rish Lakish, what's the reason why a father can make his son a Nazir? To teach him mitzvahs. So why can the relatives object? Are the relatives empowered to say don't teach the mitzvahs? How can they object and therefore and get rid of the naziris? So Ksaver, he answers like it's called chinuch the lo chashiv, any education which is which is going to cause him to be, it's going to cause him to suffer, but it's really it's like not dignified, for him to have to shave his whole head off at the end and to grow his hair long and not drink wine, etc. So that's not, if he's going to, he's not happy. And in other words, it's an Indian to teach, it says it's an Indian to teach your kid to do mitzvahs. But if it's something that he's going to object to because he's going to fight it off, what do you mean I can't drink wine, Pop? That's all I have to drink, or why can't I get a haircut? Or why do I have to shave at the end? So he says the answer is, this is kol chinuch the lo choshev, anything which is undignified, the kid's not going to want that, and the kid's going to object to it, and therefore he could push it off. That's what Rashi says. Lo nichalei meaning lo nichalei to the kid, El Rish Lakish coming in, Ksav Rish Lakish Kol Chinuch, the Lo Chashiva, which is undignified, Kagon Chinuch, Kagon Chinuch Naziris, the Bizyonahu. It's embarrassing. The Komagalach Rosho, Lo Nichla Bre, the son's not happy, the Mishmach Yichal Limchos. That's what he says. In other words, if you're gonna teach your kid a mitzvah, fine. But if you're gonna teach him something which is going to find repulsive, he's gonna have to cut his whole hair off, and he's not gonna want to do that. You can relax that rule of chinuch. Again, according to Rabbi Yochanan, therefore, that's also even though the kid's not bar mitzvah and he's not really a real nazir because he could just object to it, but still he has to shave He has to shave his whole head. And when you shave your whole head, there's a rule: you're not allowed to shave off your sideburns, rounding off the sideburns, right? Like the Galachim used to do, right? Or they still do, right? That you have to keep your sideburns. So when you shave your whole head off, you're also getting rid of the sideburns. So if you're a regular Nazir, it's halacha mashmi sinai, fine, we can understand why the father can shave his whole head like any other Nazir or Nazirah. Ella, Rish Lakish, Rish Lakish, mitzvahs, just to teach him mitzvahs. You're rounding off his sideburns when you cut his hair off at the end of 30 days. In other words, hakafa is only also if you get a haircut and you cut off your sideburns. But if you shave your whole head off, like you shave everything off, you shave your whole head, that's not called hakafa. Hakafa's color rosh is only an isur drabanan. Okay, it's still also to cut your whole hair off. People today, it's very common. People who are bald, they like to shave their whole head off, so people will think that they're not bald, like the comb over. If they do, they'll think they're not bald. They're still bald. It's not going to help. So, but he knows that hakavas kol rosh is not considered. It's only really deraisa if you have a haircut, you have hair, and you cut off the sideburns. But if you shave everything off your hair, that's not an issue deraisa. It's only a rabbanan. But there's also, on the other hand, opposing that is a chinuch rabbanan, teaching him about a nazir. Plus the chinuch rabbanan, the mitzvah of chinuch rabbanan comes v'dochi hakafed rabbanan and overrules the hakafed rabbanan. So he knows that hakafas kol rosh, as a machlok is about that. If shaving off your whole head, and you shave your whole head, is that over on los hakifu or not? So he says Rishlakish will hold that's not a doraisa, it's only drabanan. And we have the other drabanan of teaching him what a nazir is. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Damar Alach Ibn Nazir again. According to Rabbi Yochanan, says that it's also Hashem Sinai Hachim Megaleach. That's why he shaves, right? Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Damar Alach Ibn Nazir Hachim Megaleach. Maisi carbon. I understand why he shaves when he at the end of 30 days, meaning when he shaves, he brings his karbanos because that's Halachim Hashem Sinai. That not only is a regular nazir brings his karbanos, but even a nazir in chinuch, like teaching a child, also brings karbanos. El Rish Lakish. What do you mean to teach him mitzvahs? It's not really, he's not really a nazir. It's just to teach him mitzvahs, right? You teach him how to do things. But how can you bring karbanos? It's going to be chum mazar. Ksavar, the answer is like shows chum bazara is lav doraisa. Okay. In other words, it's not the isser of chum bazara is not doraisa. It's only drabanan. So again, you have the drabanan of chinuch overpowering that and overruling that. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, the Malach Ibn Nazir. If you overcome it's nazir, so that's why he did ahachi kimatami. Let's say the kid becomes tamei, and you have to bring karbanos of maisi carbon sipar. You bring carbon sipar ba'achol kohen, and the kohen malika. Remember, malika. What is malika? When the kohen shechts the birds with his right thumbnail, right, and that's only okay on a bird that's kachim. If a kohen does that on a chicken today, that's nevela. So if you say, like Rabbi Yochanan, that what? Then it's halacha mashma sinai that a nazir, not only a regular nazir, but even a nazir, whom a person makes his son a nazir, he's a real nazir. And if he becomes tamei, he brings the birds and the aisle. But if he brings the birds, how do you mock of the birds? By doing malika. Okay, the kohen does malika. Fine, and the kohen can eat that. Which one? He only eats the chatas, of course. The older bird is totally burnt, but he eats the chatas bird. Ella, the Rish Lakish, Hakachol Nevela. He's eating Nevela. According to Rish Lakish, it's only in a chinuch. Show him how to do things. It's not really a carbon. So if it's not a carbon, how can the kohen do malika on the bird and eat it? It's going to be a Nevela. Ksavar Kabyosi, he holds like Kabyosi Revuda, the Ein Shchita Lof Torah, who holds that a bird does not, just like fish don't have to be shechted, right? You don't shecht a fish, you just kill it. Torah also, it's only Drabanan that we do Shchita. You don't really do Shchita. And therefore, you can kill it any way you want. It's not an avela. And the chulin the azara lav the oraisa. Okay, so number one, there's no shchita on a bird in the Torah, and chulin bazara is not the oraisa as he said before, and therefore there's no issue of chulin bazara. And even if you say that it's not holy, number one, if it's only chinuch, so it's not even holy, right? There's no real carbon over here. And the answer is okay, chulin bazara is not a problem, and you don't need shchita on it anyway. But is that really the case? And we're doing a lot of kulas over here, right? Saying that he doesn't hold this, doesn't that. Does Rav Yossi really hold that what? That there's no shchita, that shchut sof is not the oraisa, that chulin bazar is not the oraisa, and ain't shchit loaf minator. Does really hold all that? That more we'll continue with this tomorrow, where we pick up from here on tomorrow's daf. Tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. Remember, we daven at 6 o'clock, and daf is always at the same time. Have a good day, everybody.
Take care.